General Sani Abacha. For 5 years he ruled Nigeria in the most ruthless regime in the country's history. Notoriously, he had jailed and executed his opponents, including human rights activist Ken Saro-Wiwa. But most of all, he looted the country. Before he died 2 years ago, he stole between $4 and $10 billion. At least $500 million went through London. Now Nigeria's new democratic government wants it back.
This is our money. We have proven that it is our money. Freeze the account and repatriate the money in the account. And if anything has to be chased from that account, we expect that we will chase the money to wherever it has gone and get the money back to Nigeria.
Today, a high-powered government team chaired by the Home Office and including the Serious Fraud Office, the Metropolitan and City of London Police are poring over a confidential document. It's the Nigerian government's formal request for assistance to find out what's happened to money it has evidence passed through London. London, it says, was used to transfer out of Nigeria and to launder the proceeds of pillaging. Channel 4 News can reveal that the Nigerian submission gives details of dozens of accounts held by the Abacha family, their cronies and offshore companies at 16 London banks. Personal accounts through which passed millions at the Midland, now HSBC, and NatWest. Barclays, from where some $60 million, now suspected of being bribes, was transferred to Abacha accounts. Citibank Private Bank, Merrill Lynch, and ANZ, through which over $55 million was moved. But how is it, if the Nigerian evidence is sound, that London banks have been used by what President Obasanjo calls the Abacha criminal organization? By law, the city's banks are supposed to ring alarm bells if they suspect they're being used to handle the proceeds of international criminal activity.
The bank is supposed to, if it has knowledge or suspicion that the monies that it is handling represent the proceeds of criminal conduct, make a disclosure to a constable or, in practice, the National Criminal Intelligence Service.
But what did the city do? The ways General Abacha looted Nigeria were ruthlessly crude and effective.
General Abacha and those around him did direct looting, direct stealing from the treasury through what they call security vote. They just write an amount of money which is approved by Abacha himself, and of course is siphoned out. And the estimate is that what has been stolen through that method is in the region of about $2.2 billion.
The chief bagman at the heart of the operation was Abacha's son, Mohammed Sani. Today he's in jail in Nigeria, awaiting trial for conspiracy to murder. But when his dad was milking the country, Mohammed often came to London, where he stayed in a flat bought for himself in West Kensington. From here, he sometimes moved money in and out of London banks and around the world financial system. One port of call was also to the offices of Smith & Tyres in South London, of David Jones, a long-standing family business friend from before when General Abacha took power. Today, the Nigerian government has asked the Home Office to help find out what happened as regards a document which appears to be for a $1.25 million transfer to Jones last year, sanctioned by Abacha's son, Mohammed. We talked to David Jones, who described today's Nigerian investigations as fog and mist, and declined to be interviewed. Another stop, the discreet offices of Citibank Private Bank off Berkeley Square. Here Abacha's son was a valued customer. One of his accounts here was in a front name. There was a special code and instructions not to forward mail or talk on the phone. Last year, a U.S. Senate committee investigated Citibank Private Bank's relationship with the Abachas. It found that the bank's behavior was not up to expected standards. We showed the committee's evidence to Toby Graham.
The amounts that are being banked are enormous by anyone's standards, far beyond what you would expect the president or head of state or his family to be legitimately banking each year. Questions would be asked about where this money is coming from, and they were asked, and there were no satisfactory answers. There are various vague explanations about petroleum monies and trading in commodities. This would, one would expect, have led to a general level of concern within the bank, and it is therefore surprising that the bank did not do more at an earlier stage.
The Senate committee identified Mr. Michael Matthews as the Citibank executive who nurtured the Abacha's relationship with the bank, both before and for a few years after the general seized power.
Mr. Matthews seems to be the prime contact with the customer. It's obviously difficult to know precisely what Mr. Matthews knew, but I would be slightly surprised if he didn't have some concerns about the provenance of this money.
Perhaps none of the Abacha's looting was more cynical than one of their company's contracts to supply vaccines for Nigeria's children. The company was paid $111 million from Nigerian state funds, though the vaccines cost only $23 million. Much of the $88 million profit is still missing. At the time, some Citibank employees were alarmed, yet the bank went ahead with its role in the financing.
The vaccine contract is perhaps one of the most striking examples from the documents. The individuals within the bank that were asked to sanction this raised some concerns. One lady goes into print and says that her gut feel wasn't quite right, and that this is, in her view, a rum transaction.
Citibank say that neither they nor Mr. Matthews have done anything wrong. Mr. Matthews declined to be interviewed. Now 15 other London banks may soon be hearing from the Serious Fraud Office. The banks we named told Channel 4 News they acted in good faith and will help with inquiries. And the British Bankers Association does not seem unduly alarmed.
Now, suspicion is a state of mind, and your suspicion may be different from my suspicion. It is judgmental. And I believe that banks, on the whole, behave very responsibly. Sometimes they will get it wrong.
But how often do they get it wrong? In a recent report, the Cabinet Office points out that the City of London has a poor record for its size for notifying authorities of suspected illegal dealings by clients and calls for tough new measures. So too does President Obasanjo.
I believe that in banking, just as in other professions, there are ethical standards that must be maintained. An ethical standard that must be maintained in banking is when you know, because if you receive a stolen good, you are an accomplice. You are as guilty as the thief.
President Obasanjo has told us he has written to Tony Blair asking him personally to help. This is the first big test of the government's commitment to making sure the city has no dealings with the proceeds of international crime and corruption.